All right, we ready?
We are ready.
Okay. Um, I'm kind of I'm having a good time right now because I'm a huge soccer fan. So, having the World Cup on and having some games being played here, although I haven't been able to afford to go to a game at Kansas City, but it's just been really cool. So,
Have you been to fan?
I've been to a fan, yes, and there's like fan fests all over the place. So I went with our daughter to one in Blue Springs, and I wandered through the one downtown. That was really neat. It's just so cool to see so many. Like I was down there when um, just early on when the Argentinian fans kind of took over the plaza area, and I thought that was really neat. And maybe you guys, but like my Facebook or my YouTube feed, because I watched one, so now it's like, oh, he wants to see all this content. I'm getting all this video. I'm getting all these, visitors who are coming to the United States, and they're like blowing up stereotypes. And I know a lot of the stereotypes exist, but I appreciate the fact that they say, you know what, the people here are so nice, and and I've spent 33 years in the media, but they're blaming the media. The media in our country portrays America like this and like this and like this, and they're so wrong. And they're probably not wrong on all accounts, but I appreciate everything that they have said, and mostly they talk about the people. Now, sometimes they will marvel at the size of like they go into a Walmart or a Costco, and they're just like, oh my gosh. Buc-ee's in Texas, the gas station. So they kind of marvel at that, but I hear how they feel like Americans are so genuinely, authentically warm and polite and helpful, and I think I appreciate that.
And nobody got shot.
Nobody got shot. Is there a clicker or I can just click over here? So you guys know, we're just gonna have a conversation about there's all kinds of things about new ministry, how we can use this building, and I think this is one of the most. Now that I've been to pretty much every congregation, this is one of my favorite buildings. I love the sanctuary, and I realize I'm kind of old school, and I come to church wanting to worship. But I think unchurched people sometimes may be looking for different things. So I kind of have to step back and try to view the world, through maybe the eyes of somebody who's unchurched. And I'm generalizing and not saying they don't want to worship because I think people do. But I love your sanctuary. I love your location. And so I wanted to at least throw out some thoughts that we could discuss. And some of these thoughts I think you guys are probably very familiar with. So, and then an idea or a suggestion that you all might consider. And I'm open to any other ideas. There's all kinds of ideas that are out there about new expressions of ministry. We're really focused as a church this summer on the mission prayer. I'd like to do the mission prayer together, but I want to do it just one line at a time. And I'm going to kind of count us down because I want us to kind of reflect on each. I just hit it. Maybe. There we go.
Rob, if you want, I can sit forward.
Oh, no, I'm fine. I can do that. I think I can figure it out. So I'm going to read each line together, and then I'm going to pause and just kind of rest in each statement. I'm not going to spend lots of time on it because I want to get to the content, but I really think the discussion that I was asked to have here really ties into the mission prayer. So I'm going to count us down. 3, 2, 1. God. 3, 2, 1.
Help
me fully awake and ready to respond.
3, 2, 1.
Encouraged to risk something new.
3, 2, 1.
And because of blessing, love, and peace. Amen.
If we had the time, I would pause and let you reflect on each one and give me a reaction to each line, because there's depth, there's multiple dimensions to each line of this prayer. It's a simple prayer. And I really like the exercise. I've gotten to a point where I pray the Lord's Prayer all the time. I used to never pray the Lord's Prayer. But what I found is the mission prayer is in the Lord's, mission prayer is in the Lord's Prayer. You just kind of have to riff on it a little bit, but it's there. One aspect that the church is asking us to consider this summer is to think about how much we might be willing to surrender to the Spirit's lead, and really that's what the mission prayer is asking us to do, surrender. And when I talk to congregations, I want to at least think about the word surrender, because I think sometimes, and I'm going to generalize again, because I think some people, when they think about surrendering, there's different ways to think about surrendering. But when I talk about surrendering to the Holy Spirit, I think there's a depth that I struggle with sometimes. It's like when you really surrender, it's like there's a surface level and then there's a real deep level. And that's what I'm trying for myself, to kind of get beyond that surface level of surrendering. This is just kind of a dictionary definition. Surrender generally means to yield to the power, control, or possession of another, often after a struggle. I think that's key, or upon demand. It involves giving up a right. Sometimes we don't like that idea. What do you mean? I have rights? Sometimes it means giving up a right, a claim or possession, or ceasing to resist. When I kind of think about surrendering to the Holy Spirit, or surrendering to the Spirit, where will the Spirit lead today? Surrendering is something that I'm really trying to do. And I'm trying to apply some of these. Oftentimes I have priorities in my life, and it's kind of been a theme where I'm trying to, where I'm like, yeah, I'll surrender, but this is my real priority. Yeah, God, you're really important, but you're like number 2 right now, because I really want to do this. Surrendering. And the last thought on surrendering, it's like being caught in a riptide. There are good swimmers who die who get caught in a riptide. You guys know what a riptide is? You're out there in the ocean, and basically just pulls you out. And I have a friend of mine who died in a riptide. Strong swimmer. I wouldn't say like an elite swimmer, but a capable swimmer. And they found his body like a week later on the beach. But what happens, I think, a lot of times is you get pulled into it, and you're in the immensity of the ocean, and your natural instinct is to resist and to fight against that current. And a lot of the experts say that's exactly what you shouldn't do. It's just to relax and just stop resisting. Swim, but swim with the current, so you're not burning up your energy. Eventually, and it may pull you way out, but eventually you're going to be free of that riptide. But it's just so counterintuitive. I got to fight this. So in my mind, I think surrendering to the Spirit's lead is often, for some people, like getting caught in a riptide. I don't want to do that. You resist. And sometimes we fight a little bit too much. And I think when you're in a riptide, you're kind of, if you could pause and just kind of sense the immensity. The ocean's like the Holy Spirit. It's immense, broad, and it's deep. And you're just kind of surrendering to that. It helps. That's kind of the way I've been thinking about it. I'm like looking for a riptide now. I'm looking to throw myself into the riptide as related to the Holy Spirit. I told you about how much I like this particular building. I'm always into, and I think I've talked about this. So there's a website called Population Around a Point. Go anywhere, I think, in the world. And this is 2025. I was hoping they had updated to 2026, but it's 2025 data. So basically, I put a point right on the top of the congregation, right on the building. And you go a 3-kilometer circle or a 5-kilometer circle or a 6, and you kind of go all the way out to 50. But within a 3-kilometer circle of this building, or 1.86 miles, there's 43,000 people living here. This building, this congregation has more density than any congregation except for one other in the Mission Center. Anybody have an idea where that might be?
Wichita.
No?
Highlands.
That's not bad.
Did you say within the mission center?
Yes.
Highland deal like that.
Highlands is pretty good.
Shawnee Drive.
It's okay. You guys are, that's where I would have gone all those. It's University in Lawrence.
Oh.
Now, it might be that the university, they're so close to the university, that might be it. So, but there's 50,000 people within a 3-kilometer circle there. But this is pretty good.
In the school year.
Yeah, in the school year. And you all know this, there's a lot of neighborhoods really close. I mean, that you could walk to here. Certainly drive to, and I realize we're at, a car culture for the most part. And there are other more dense parts of the United States. You could go to Chicago or New York, where you might have 300,000 people within. But that's not bad for the Midwest. And I love that, and I'm thinking, this is me thinking very practical. If I were to start a new ministry, and to me, and it's not always, I'm not saying it's always about numbers, but in a sense, it feels really good when, there are more people who are interested in what you're doing. And I guess I'm thinking, man, 43,000 people. Could we come up with 100 people? 200 people? Seems reasonable to me. I mean, I'm really thrilled with this population density. I mean, I think it helps. On my drive here this morning, all kinds of people out and about. Young, old, middle-aged, doing their thing. Church is just not that meaningful. So you guys are probably into this. You probably have seen these numbers. This is from Barna and Pew Research. And Pew is a really reputable organization, probably the most objective organization, I think, in terms of media. Now, Barna is a Christian organization, but they've been doing these surveys for decades. And just a few bullet points. For the first time in decades, young adults, specifically Gen Z and millennials, are now the most regular churchgoers.
Say what those age groups are again.
Well, so Gen Z would be age 14 to 29 right now. I mean, there's when you're born, but right now it would be 14 to 29, and millennials are 30 to 45. Young adults attend services more often than older generations right now. Typical Gen Z churchgoers attend roughly 1.9 weekends per month. Millennials average 1.8 weekends per month right now. Some attend more, some less. Small groups, Gen Z attends church small groups more than any other age group. They average about 5 times a month. So that's just a way of, some larger organizations, bigger churches have small groups that are, I think, oftentimes more meaningful than big groups. This was interesting too. Both Barna and Pew said for the first time in history, young men are outnumbering young women in church service and attendance. Zoomers, Gen Z, and millennials. Because for decades, women always, those who are, and there's interesting reasons for that. Any comments on? Yes, yeah.
I was wondering how many were considered a small group.
I'm not sure. That's a good question. I mean, for most Community of Christ churches, it would be a small group. Yes.
Usually it's about 50 to 100 kids
Yep.
on a week, Wednesday.
That's a small group.
That's a small group.
Oh,
That's larger than I thought.
Yeah. What just excites me, and maybe in a couple of years things will go differently. But both Barna and Pew were like, this kind of, when they first saw it, I think they were like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right to me, to them, because this, for decades, every demographic kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Laura and I have a young millennial. Our son's 33, and an old Gen Z. Our daughter's 29, almost 30. So it's kind of like, and they're both very different people, but
Is this a particular denomination or is this a non-denominational setting?
Usually it's non-denominational.
So who's leading that?
Just random churches around. I'd assume this one is probably it's not mega churches, but bigger churches of that setting
Okay, gotcha.
where they just celebrate most of the time. So the Gen Zs feel connected to that.
so why are young people going back to church? And again, this is just based on thousands of interviews with Zoomers and millennials. And I think a lot of this is pretty easy. The young people are looking for meaning. Face-to-face relationships are deeper than digital relationships. And I'm not saying every Zoomer, every millennial, but they certainly grew up in a much more digital world. And I just think they have missed or are looking for face-to-face relationships that they can trust. Looking for an authentic, trustworthy, loving community. These aren't my words. These are just words that have popped up. Looking to fill a void in a secular culture. Now, that doesn't mean we're a pure secular culture, but we're more secular than we've ever been in terms of the United States. And you go to different parts of the country. Seattle's definitely more secular city, for example, than Kansas City. But and there is a notable increase in commitment to Christ and Bible reading, Bible study, Bible reading. When I was a news director, there was one thing that I felt like became a real truth, especially these days. Today, people of all ages, but certainly people who are really busy, will commit their valuable time only to what is most meaningful. I think we're more scheduled than we've ever been. We're more connected than we've ever been. We walk around with our smartphones. We get push alerts, texts, emails. I know young people are kids. It kind of happened when I was, my kids were like, when I was growing up, there was never any football or athletics, sports, youth sports on Sunday. But gosh, I remember both of our kids were soccer players and they played soccer in college and it helped pay for their education. But there were weekends we were gone all weekend. And I think it's even, I don't want to say worse, but I think it's even more. I think bandwidths are stretched. Whatever age you are. I mean, any of you ever sense like, man, I am busy this week? Yeah, I mean, I just stretched. And I think for lay ministers especially, I just think it's harder than ever sometimes. It's just really a struggle. So I believe there's some truth to this. It's not that they don't think, for example, I'm bringing up my daughter. Both my son and my daughter are active churchgoers. Our daughter Hannah's 29, almost 30. She's married. They have a 2-year-old son. They both Hannah and her husband work full time. Her husband works for Delta. He's a lead ramp agent, the people that kind of bring in the planes and help, so he works for Delta. And every 6 months, his schedule changes. And so sometimes on Sunday morning, it's just Hannah. Now, when Brandon's there, he goes to church with her. She goes to the table in Independence. A lot of young people are there. But there are times when she just doesn't go. And I think for multiple reasons, and I will bug her, being her dad. My father always said, Rob, we're going to church, oh, Dad, this is me in high school. But he would always emphasize ministry of presence, Rob. Don't be so selfish, Dad. He would just talk about the power of just the ministry of presence. He says, don't underestimate how meaningful it is when you just show up. And he drove that into my head, and even if I resisted that, so Hannah will say, I know, Dad, ministry of presence, ministry of like, I'm sorry, Ann. It's not that she doesn't think church is not important. She will say, Dad, it's important to me. And I will argue back. I'll say, it may be important, but it's really not that meaningful to you, in my opinion. She says, well, Dad, and she's probably one of those Zoomers that will go twice a month. Of course, I'm her dad, and I'm like, Hannah, ministry of presence, I want you to be there all the time. I respect that. Her bandwidth is full. But I just think in most people's lives, no matter your age, you will only commit your valuable time to what is truly most meaningful. And so I say that because I think sometimes when we think about what we're doing in general, if people aren't here, it's because it's not that meaningful to them. It may be meaningful to us, but you think about people who have kind of drifted away, well, what we are doing here. There are other things. We talk about COVID impacted a lot of people. Well, that's because people found, I like to do this better now. It's more meaningful to me in my limited amount of time. Again, it doesn't mean they don't think church is important. It's just, I think when it comes down to it, people will only commit to something that truly feeds them, to really what is most meaningful. And that might be a job. I have to go to my job. Like in Brandon's case, he might want to go to church, but he's like, well, my job's pretty meaningful to me, so I'm going to go. So that's what I'm saying. But sometimes when you have the time, people are making decisions on what is truly most meaningful. And I think especially today when our bandwidth is really limited. Just something to think about. There is no one size fits all approach to creating meaning or creating a church experience. I think sometimes people try to come up with, this is it, we found it. But I definitely, I think of our two young people in our lives, our son, who's 33, his preferred way of worship or church is dramatically different than our daughter's. I'll just say, Hayden left Community of Christ when he was like 24 years old, 26 years old. He will tell you, Dad, I can give you all kinds of really cool experiences I've had at Community of Christ. And I think when he started out his career, he works for Zoom. He's like a manager for Zoom. So Zoom does much more than virtual meeting spaces. They have all types of things, that they do. But he's in a very digital, like a lot of young people are, he's in a very digital occupation. And one thing he told me, and it kind of stuck with me. Let me back up. So Hayden's really values ritual. Now, he was an athlete. A lot of athletes do a lot of ritual. A lot of people in drama have a lot of ritual. A lot of scientists have a lot of ritual in their work. But athletes, and I can relate to that, both Hannah and Hayden, there's a lot of ritual, when you're an athlete. But there's a lot of ritual on lots of things. So he really values ritual, and it helps him connect to the Holy Spirit. And so he said, after he kind of started exploring, he tried the Episcopal Church, much more ritual, in the way they worship. He tried Orthodox Christianity, a lot more ritual. Mm-hmm. And he ended up in Roman Catholicism. He's now a member of the Catholic Church. Now, I would say if you asked Hayden when he started out, do you agree with everything in terms of the belief structure of Roman Catholicism? He would say no. But the worship is what he really needed. And I remember him saying this to me, and it has stuck with me. Dad, I need my church experience to be nothing like the rest of my life. I need my church experience to be nothing like the rest of my life. So he would say, so I would go, this is when he was a young man before he became a member of Zoom. He kind of followed in my footsteps. I was in the TV news business. I was a journalist for 33 years. He followed in my footsteps. He became a digital producer for a local ABC affiliate in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He would go to church there, Community of Christ, and he said, I loved it. He reminded me of, all the other Community of Christ churches. But he said, I would come in and we would high five and we would hug it up and we would talk about our day and we'd get our coffee and we would go into the sanctuary eventually and with our coffee and we would sit down and we would pretty much chat and then the service would start. And he said, I'm not saying it was a bad experience, but he said, it was a lot like the rest of my life. And we all had our coffee. We all high five. We just talked about things, just like when I would go to work. Yes, we would have some theology. We would try to worship. But he said, it's like we would all be chatting it up. This is him. And all of a sudden, we were requested to slam on our brakes and worship. And he said, some people can do that. He acknowledged that. He said, I need to be kind of brought to a worship. I need to be prepared to worship. And to me, he would say, it's kind of like when I would play soccer. It's like pre-game, you were doing all this ritual. You were preparing to perform. You were preparing for the game. And he said there was a routine that brought us to that experience. And so this is when he said, I realized that, and he said, not only that, he said, one thing I noticed whenever I would go to community, we would talk about everything. He was working at a television station. The country is becoming very polarized. And so he's sitting in the newsroom and he's getting calls all day long of angry news consumers. Sometimes they were conservative. Sometimes they were progressive, unhappy with the way they were covering the news. And they're not perfect. And he said, so all day long, I'm talking politics with people. And he said, I would go to church sometimes and we'd be talking politics there. And he said, it's just conversation because that's what we talk about a lot. And so he just said, that's when he said, I recognize that I think I need something that's nothing like the rest of my life anyway. Probably spending too much time because our daughter's not like this. Our daughter would not be a Catholic. She's much more social than Hayden. That's why she's at the table. It's a different experience. But I have gone to Hayden's church. He goes to Our Lady of Good Counsel in downtown Kansas. Well, actually, I think it's in Westport in Kansas City. Just really quickly on this. I've gone a few times with Hayden, and I will tell you, I invited my wife to come after I've been 4 or 5 times because Hayden would invite me. This was actually before I became Mission Center President, whenever we would come in and visit. One of their children, they have 4 kids. One of their children was getting baptized. So he said, hey, Mom, Dad, would you come? Of course. And we went into the church. And one thing I noticed, I wanted Laura to see how Laura reacted, my wife, because I'd been there a few times. And so I'm kind of watching her. We sit down. And she leans over to me. She goes, where are all the old people?
Yeah.
And I'm, Laura's 61. I'm almost 59. We're middle-aged, but we're not young. And Hayden will say, Dad, this was a 17-year. The parish almost closed, or the diocese almost closed this church 17 years ago. They brought in a priest, a middle-aged priest who was very focused on young people. I'm going to really quickly give you the background. He worked it for 5 or 6 years. He added maybe 40 or 50 young people, according to Hayden, according to what he's been told. Then they brought in a young priest who was in his 30s. He worked it for 5 or 6 years. The church continued to grow, and their current priest, who's been there for like 7 years, I forgot his last name. He's probably 38 now, but so when he started, he was in his early 30s. But when 17 years ago, there were about 30 people rattling around in their chapel. Now, when you go, this is after 17 years, there are 320 people for the 8:30 Mass and at least that many for the 10:30 Mass every Sunday. So this didn't happen overnight. But what did happen, Hayden said, somewhere along the way, this became known as the young person's parish, people will drive for an hour, young people. And when you do look, there you can see old people, but 20, 30, and 40 somethings everywhere. Everywhere. It is, it kind of catches you off guard. Right now, there are more young people checking out Catholicism. 60 Minutes did a story maybe about a month ago. And they were interviewing some bishops, and I think some, they didn't exactly understand why, but like, yes, there are a lot of young people showing up. I think there's something to the ritual. There's something to that's old. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It is what it is.
Well, I think you've had a couple of popes too, with Francis and now Leo, that appeal to the younger generations in their social views.
I think there's something to that. I do think there's something to that. On the other hand, every time I've gone to that parish, I've never heard a single, I can't ever think of anything having to do with any political ideology. And that's what Hayden liked about it. Now, I'm sure his experience in the Catholic Church has probably changed his theology. We don't talk a lot of politics. So I'm no doubt that his theology has been impacted. But I know when he joined, he was probably, he's very left of center.
You look at the news coverage, Leo comes out on the balcony in St. Peter's Square and it's filled with young people.
Right. So I'm not sure. There's a lot of reasons for this, and I'm not here to say we shall become like the Catholic Church. I'm not saying that at all, because there are other churches that are growing as well. I'm just saying there is some appeal to that type of experience right now. Hannah, on the other hand, has no interest in that type of worship. She just doesn't. So I'm not. Again, there's multiple ways of. So I want to talk about one thing. Any of you watch The Bear?
Ah, yes.
I love this line. Carmi's one of the lead characters. He's a great chef, a very tormented chef, young person. But I think in the last episode, he says, to break patterns, you have to break patterns. Oh, I love that. And so when you think about the pattern of our church, and just church in general, as people have left, I think we have to think about breaking patterns. If we have a certain pattern, certain trend, if we're losing young people, if we're losing people in general, that's a pattern that's been happening over decades. I think we do have to think about what we are doing, which is also a pattern. As I've gone to different mission center congregations, and Laura and I have been members of probably 10 different congregations over the last 33 years as we've kind of moved around the country. There's a lot of similarities in the way Community of Christ worships. There's some differences, but there's great. And sometimes I think there's real value in consistency. But I guess I would say we can at least look at, is this a pattern that we might want to break in some form or fashion? Getting back to the surrendering, sometimes that's hard. If we're going to drop ourselves into a riptide and we're going to feel that everything's kind of going this way, are we going to fight that? Or are we going to flow that way? To break patterns, you have to break patterns. So I want to talk about one thing. I want to make sure I'm mindful of the time here. I at least want to explore one new ministry that is really growing. And this is I'm not suggesting we do this. I'm just saying it is working. And I've spent some time talking with members who are doing this type of church. I think there might be one church, Community of Christ Church, that is at least seriously considering. I don't know if they've done it. I think it's the next slide. Yeah. Dinner Church. Any of you heard about Dinner Church? Dinner Church, and this is right off their website, and actually it's called the Dinner Church Coalition.
Sorry.
That's fine. Dinner Church is a table-centered expression of church where community, hospitality, and the story of Jesus come together over a shared meal. Rooted in the practices of Jesus and the early church, it creates sacred space for strangers to become friends, stories to be shared, and lives to be transformed. It's much more than a potluck. Dinner Church reimagines the meal as mission, forming new faith communities around the table, not the stage or the rostrum, the podium, or whatever you want to call it. Most dinner churches happen in the evening at night. And I'm going to give you a really quick, what happens is I'm going to give you one story. I was talking to an Episcopal priest in Florida, who their parish started a dinner church. And I said, John, his name's John. John, what's the size of your congregation right now, or your parish right now? He goes, we average about 50 people every Sunday. And he said, we used to be, once upon a time, 200, 300 people. And I said, how long have you been doing dinner church? He goes, well, we've been doing it for a couple of years. I said, how big's your dinner church? He said, about 220. And he said, we're getting so big, it's time to probably plant another dinner church. And I said, do people who go to dinner church go to your regular Sunday service? He goes, not really. They're not interested in that. The couple who started dinner church live in Seattle, and I have the website. I think you should just check it out. And I think they started at 17. I don't know. I'm not sure when they started. At least 10 years ago. And again, Seattle's a very secular city. They were both involved, and I think in a non-denominational church. I know they were both heavily involved. I think he was a pastor. They don't even do this in church because Seattle's so secular. They call it a community dinner, and they just do these at community centers. And basically, the experience goes: they serve a meal, everybody comes in. He likes round tables because it's easier for conversation, but you have 5 or 6 people at a table. Usually there's somebody, in this case, if this congregation were to do it, there's somebody kind of leading that conversation at the table, and there's like ice-breaking questions, very light questions. What's your favorite color and why? What's your top 3 movies of all time? These types of ice-breaking questions, you're just getting to know people. That's all you're doing. But there's a member of the congregation at every table. There's a Jesus story. There's like a talk in a Jesus story. He said no longer than 7 minutes long. There's usually live music of some sort. Could be acoustic guitar, could be a piano, could be just, he said generally what we do is have live music, and they have some people. He said we actually brought some people in to do that. The meals are really good. But he said they're very simple. Sometimes we might do rice bowls. Sometimes we might do spaghetti. Sometimes we might do, he said there's some effort there. You have to do this. And they do it once a week, and they do it on an evening. There's different ways variations of dinner church. But a lot of people who go to dinner church are unchurched, kind of going back to, some of them are young, some of them are not so young, but I think they're isolated. They're looking for community. They're looking for relationships that they can trust. In Seattle, they've made it. This is what dinner church suggests, and dinner church will help you. I mean, it's not a money-making operation, but they'll really help you if you want to. They'll help design it and walk you through it. You don't have to do that. I think the St. Paul congregation, Community of Christ, at least bought the book, and there's lots of free seminars. So I think they're either getting ready to start a dinner church, or maybe it's Minneapolis. I'm not sure which one, but it's in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. When you get to 220 people, they plant another church. And I think they've been doing it for 11 years, 10 or 11 years in Seattle, this couple. They started with one. They just planted, I think, their 17th dinner church in Seattle because they get to 220. They don't want to get any bigger than that because they feel like you get over 220, it's either 220 or 250. I think it's 220. You start to lose intimacy. I mean, I can't imagine having 220 people. That would seem huge, but I think the point is, like, if you went to a high school, and you have a class at some point, like my class was small. I had about 110 people. They're small, but I knew everybody. But both of my kids, their high school class was well over 1,000. They just kind of had their small group that they knew really well. And I think they're thinking the same thing. They don't want it to become unwieldy, too big. They're not interested in a mega church model. They want it to feel small. And 220 sounds big to us, but to a lot of churches, that's pretty small. Like, oh, that's not very big. You got to get bigger than that. But so they plan another church after they get to 220, and they're up to 17 or 18 just in the city of Seattle. Again, a very secular. And when you talk to people, and you can kind of you can go to YouTube and you can watch people. You interview people. What do you like about? Just describe the inner church, and some people will say community, which sounds very much like Community of Christ. Some people say, will say just one word. Some people say good food. A lot of people say, this is my church. This is my church. This is off of their website. Who is Dinner Church for? Dinner Church is for pastors, lay leaders, volunteers, and everyday disciples who long to reach people outside traditional rhythms of Sunday morning worship. It is especially powerful in communities where people are spiritually curious, disconnected from church, or simply hungry for community. And that's, I think that is one reason why young people are coming to church. There are multiple reasons, but they are hungry for community. They're hungry for something more meaningful. What happens in the inner church? Guests are welcome to a warm, inclusive meal, no strings attached. While sharing food and stories, a short Jesus story or gospel message is offered. There is time for conversation, prayer, and connection. It is relational, which really, to me, blends well with Community of Christ. It is relational, not performance-driven, and the table, not the stage, is the centerpiece. And I think they kind of get back to, this is long before there were churches. Early Christians, they would meet in homes around a meal. And so they're trying to kind of go back to that, make it feel less performative, more of a conversation with people. Why tables? Why now? In a world marked by loneliness, division, and spiritual disconnection, the table offers a powerful antidote. Shared meals create a space for authentic connection, deep listening, and the slow relational pace that discipleship requires. Jesus didn't just preach sermons. He fed people, welcomed outsiders, and transformed lives around tables. No, and I know I've been doing all the talking here, but there's the if you want to go look at their website, and again, there's all types of free. They're constantly doing free Zoom presentations where you can ask questions if you're just curious. This is just one expression. I'm not saying this is the expression. Yes, sir.
How does one let people know about this sort of thing? It's more of a general question, really, but how in this particular thing? I know word of mouth is one thing, but you have to get started.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. As I understand, most of the time they canvass a neighborhood. They may knock on a door, or they may just leave a flyer. You're not supposed to put it in a mailbox, but they may just stick it on their door. Mm-hmm. But they canvass the neighborhood, and a lot of times they don't even call it dinner church. They may call it a community dinner. Like Seattle doesn't call it church. You can call it. I've noticed different dinner churches call it different things. But you're inviting people to a meal, basically, is what you're doing. Now, you're not hiding the fact. Once you're there, that we're a church, and we're going to talk about the gospel. So that's how they start. But then they can kind of tell you, word of mouth is the most powerful. Most of the time they say, like the guy in John in Florida, I forgot which city they were in Florida. He said when they started out, their first dinner church, they had 12 people, which they thought was fantastic. They were hoping they would have 8. He said we had 12 people. And he said the next week we had 12 people, and the next week we had 15 people. He said it just grew slowly. He said now we're at, we're a little over 200. I said 220. I think they were a little over 200, and this is when I last had a conversation with him, and it's been months ago. But that was over a year. They'd grown to 200 people, and I just love the juxtaposition. Well, how's that impacting your Sunday morning experience? He goes, it's not. He goes, a few have showed up, but he said it's just so different. He said it's completely different. I don't know that I would enjoy it as much because I like worship. But I have to put on my unchurched, look at the world through unchurched people. Yes.
Okay, the other thing is, once it does grow and gets to be fairly large,
Right.
are these like potlucks, or do they hire in food delivery, or what?
I think mostly what happens is as they grow and people are really excited about this, this becomes their church. So other people help prepare meals. But as I understand it, they take up a collection to buy the meal. They kind of recruit other people who are really excited about this, becomes their church. Would you cook a meal, or be part of a meal cooking team? You're cooking the meal. But we have a potluck tradition. So I don't know if that's a big jump for us, but that is something to think about. There is an expense of preparing a meal, and the meals I think need to be good. I don't know. It would not surprise me. I don't. This is a good question. If it gets so big, maybe they do have somebody bring in a meal. But if you have 200 people, and you're like, hey, we want to have what do we want to have next? Asian next week. Take a collection. We're going to have so and so prepare an Asian meal. But I think when they start small. My sense is they're cooking a meal. Good question.
I was going to say, okay, so I'm in seminary, and when we have focus, we
Yeah.
have community meals probably 4 out of the 6 days. And so they have a box where we can contribute. But Tony Chavala-Smith always says, if you can't put anything in, that's okay. Eat.
Yes. Yeah.
So something like that, as long as we.
That's my sense is that there's no heavy arm twisting,
Yeah.
with community dinner. And again, I just like the idea, and it's an expression. Yeah.
So,
Does each table tell the story, or do they have one person that tells the story and then everyone talks about it?
I think, as I understand it, and again, there's probably different variations, but what I like about talking to them is they'll say, yeah, we've been doing this for a while. We kind of know what works. I think the way they do it is you come in and you sit at a table. And I think they encourage people to sit at a different table every week, like even coming regularly. And somebody at the table leads a discussion, ice-breaking conversation, general conversation, not a religious conversation, just conversation, kind of getting to know you a little bit. But when the presentation begins, everybody kind of turns and listens to somebody, like the short homily or the Jesus story. They even give you, like, here's a whole book on the way to deliver a Jesus story to unchurched people. They have these resources. You don't have to use it. They don't pressure you to buy it. But I think when the time comes, and there's prayer, some of them get to a point where they actually have a communion service. I don't know that I would do a communion service right out of the gate, but I think they get to, as they tell people, this is an important tradition and an important sacrament in Christianity. We're going to do sacrament together. So I know some of them do that. And it would not surprise you. Can kind of go where you want it to go. I mean, we have wonderful sacraments. So, I just think of, laying on of hands. If somebody in our community is struggling, we could say, this is something that we do in Community of Christ, something that we're going to do at whatever we call this. I could see doing a sacrament, laying on hands. It doesn't have to be in front of the group or a baby blessing. I see weaving in our sacraments at some point. That's probably not right out of the gate, but yeah.
When you showed that chart about the population
Mhm.
in our area,
Yeah.
is there any more data about age? Any more data about what that population consists
I don't
of?
have it. I know it exists. This particular website doesn't offer it. It's just a pure population. But yes, you can get demographic information.
some of that's at the library.
Yeah, and you could probably get it online as well. And I focus on young people. I don't care if a group of 90-plus-year-olds show up. We want to share the gospel. We want to share the uniqueness of Community of Christ. I don't know that this is the hard part. And I think in Seattle, they would even, when we talked to the people who started the churches in Seattle, they're religious people, they're dedicated, devout Christians. But they decided not to call, they called it community dinner. There was no reference, when they were telling people about it. They were not trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. They just knew inviting people to church wasn't going to work in Seattle in general. Now, once people showed up, they realized, oh, this is kind of one of those Christian things. But I think their approach was, it was just very laid back, and they didn't start off with they started off with just having conversation with people at the table. And they don't give up. The guy in Florida, they still have church on Sunday morning. They didn't stop doing that. Yeah.
So my question is for a congregation like ours of maybe 40 people,
Mm-hmm.
and we are all involved in worship in the morning.
Right.
What do you suggest for lay ministers on how to add? Do we add or do we subtract from our Sunday morning so that we're not going towards burnout like we do?
No, I think that's a great question, and I don't have a simple answer for that. I don't. To me, it kind of goes back to, and this is something you should pray about. I'm not saying dinner church is what you should do. There's another, just really quickly, I just wanted to mention this before we break here. There's that's the website. I didn't mean to do that, but that's the website. There's another example. A woman who's a pastor of a church, and I believe it's Virginia or West Virginia. I'm sorry, a church planter, hopped on. I still hang out with a group of 70 in the Boundary Waters, because that's where we were. So, and it's not just a group of 70. Actually, it's mission-minded people. So there are other priesthood members and other just members of Community of Christ churches, and we gather once a month. I haven't been able to do it as often since I've been here. But they invited a church planter, and he used this as an example of a woman who's growing her church in a small town in, I think, West Virginia or Virginia. I want to say West Virginia. And this is how she's growing it. She advertises on her sign, and she also prints little cards. She's big at networking. And he would say, the biggest thing that we don't do very well is network. She goes to school board. She goes to city council members. She goes to the mayor's office. She goes to all. And she hands out these cards. And she'll say, hey, we're starting a three-part series on finding peace after divorce. We're starting that, this Sunday. It's going to be a 3-part series, and she hands these cards out. And all of her messages are highly relevant. I mean, that's an example of, you're not going to see Jesus loves you on her sign. It's going to be finding peace after divorce. 3-part series starts this Sunday or this Thursday. There's other examples, but she tries to really focus on issues impacting unchurched people. There's no mention of, Jesus can help you. All are welcome. We're inclusive. She's like, she's saying, I'm not saying that's not important. She's just saying, I'm trying to keep it real with people that are struggling with real issues in their lives. And now that was one example, and she probably has a lot of charisma. She's probably pretty good at what she does, but her church is booming. And she's been doing it for 2 years. She's very focused on very clear on marketing this type of way. And so, and she says, or he says, according to her, what happens is she'll go up to somebody and say, you may not know, your marriage may be fine. Is any marriage fine? That's what I would ask my wife. Are we fine? But every marriage has struggles, but she may say, I'm not suggesting that you are on the verge of divorce, but if you know somebody who's recently been divorced or struggling or come out of a long-term relationship, maybe not even divorce, maybe just partners, and they're really struggling, we're starting this 3-part series on Sunday. Please invite them, And she weaves, she'll research this. You can go to the internet and find all types of, important things that you should be doing. to help find some peace and joy. But she weaves scripture in. It's a sermon, but she makes sure she's addressing that one thing. We think of our themes, and I love our themes, but she wouldn't use any of those themes. She would use very specific, maybe, is your child full of anxiety at school? We're starting a 2-part series this Sunday. Now, you're going to get a gospel message, but she's also going to talk very specifically, and she'll reference it. I talked to so-and-so who is an expert in child psychology, and she says bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. But she does a good job, apparently, of weaving in scripture and the gospel into her messages. That's just another example. So she's not doing it in her church. She's just completely kind of thinking about how she's doing outreach and how she's recruiting people to come. And people are finding community. Maybe they go there because, yeah, man, I invited my sister because she's struggling after a really rocky marriage and a terrible divorce. And she came to these 3-part series and she stayed because she found community. It's just, again, it's a completely different way of thinking of surrendering. And again, I'm not saying this is what we should do. It's just completely changing the way we talk to unchurched people. And it's working for her. And he recommends it. And this guy was like, I have a sermon series, and he gave us some examples to us in this mission-minded group. He said, I'll send you, and I didn't take him up on it. He would. I still had his connection. I'll give you 3 sermons on 3 different topics, these types of very real-world topics, if you would like to use them. He said, it's not that hard to do if you're smart. You can figure it out. But I liked her approach. I thought that was an interesting approach.
I think applying this would take some imagination for our group. Although we are a church community, we are not a community church. Russ and Dorothy may well be the only 2 people that live within that 3-kilometer radius. The rest of us,
Right.
That's 1.9 miles, so it's not very large. The rest of us live outside of that, all over Johnson County and in Missouri and different, places. So to come together and imagine how, we're going to go hand out invitations in Prairie Village requires me to drive from DeSoto, Kansas to get up here. So I'm just saying, I think it's a great idea if we had, and maybe the church in the 1950s, Mission Road, may well have all lived in close proximity to each other. So over the years, we've, kind of gotten farther and farther out.
Yeah.
So we do have once a month, we have a book club after church, and we have a community meal, and maybe that could be used in this way.
Yeah.
To invite people in. We have non-member people that come because of the book club.
I will tell you, and I'm not trying to grease the wheel. Every Sunday morning, I'm at a different Midlands congregation. That's my commitment. But if Mission Road says, you know what, we've been discerning this, we want to try community dinner church, you tell me what night, and I'll be there. But before that, I will take a group and I will walk the neighborhood. I'm more than happy to do that. I will be more than happy, and I will be here whatever night you're doing it, I'll be here every night. Jonathan Armstrong, director of Center of Hope, he's joined our church. You guys aware of this, which I think is great.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He was in seminary, I think a progressive Catholic seminary, I think. He dropped out of that, not because he didn't think there was value. I think it was like a 5 or 6 year seminary. So
Oh my gosh.
I'm just burning it. I just can't. I'm too busy with the center, and so he's in a better place. But he was telling me, because I try to get there every week. As I'm getting to know Jonathan, he's like, but there's a void now. And he said, I'm faith is really important to me, and I've joined this. I've joined the Community of Christ. He goes to the Highlands. He and I are talking about it's kind of a little spin-off of dinner church, and he's excited. In fact, he and his husband are coming to our house on Tuesday, and we're going to kind of rough out a model for dinner church for the Highlands.
Wow.
Highlands doesn't know we're going to do this.
Surprise.
Well, I will ask the pastor team, before we do it. Now, I do know Missy, she's our bookkeeper. And so I've told Missy, I'd like to do something there. She's like, bring it on. So anyway, Jonathan and I are going to kind of map out a dinner church experience on Monday night, tomorrow night. He really wants to do something. He wants to be actively involved in engaging community. So, and whenever you have somebody who's excited, and he drives, they live in Kansas City, Kansas. It's not, so he has to drive to the Highlands, which is fine.
He's been sick.
Pardon?
He's sick.
He is, yeah. Well, the difference between the Highlands, there are communities, neighborhoods around the Highlands, closer than you realize. But when you drive there, you're like, this is kind of remote. I think there's like 30,000 people within a 3-kilometer circle, not as dense as Mission Road, but it's pretty dense. He's like, Rob, I don't know about, knocking on doors. Like, well, we don't have to knock on doors. But we can at least canvass the neighborhood. If we see somebody, hey, we're having a dinner, we're starting a dinner, and this is what it's all about. We'd love for you to come, I said, our goal, Jonathan, is 8 people. Let's just make it getting 8 people to come. And if we have less, we have less. But he's excited about figuring this out. So I'm just saying, if you all, and I think it's going to be a Thursday, because I talked to Missy. I said, when are you guys available? Because they rent, the Highlands, there's always something going on there. Just scouts, volleyball, She said, Thursday night's the only night that's open. I said, okay, I guess we'll do it Thursday night. So that's our goal, our tentative goal. I'm just saying, if you all decide we'd like to try this here, I'm in. And I will come, and I will be here every Tuesday night. That's my top priority. I love visiting. I love being part. I don't love the administrative duties. I love the administrative duties. I love this church, and I love the people that I'm meeting, and there's some really cool people in this mission center, and I want more people to be in relationship with us. I want us to become more meaningful. I just want us to become more meaningful. And I told Kenny, when I kind of researched, I'm always curious about the density around, and like, well, this Mission Road's great. It's one of the most dense. You guys live in one of the most dense neighborhoods of any mission center church. So again, no pressure. I don't want you to feel pressure. I will help you. I want you to know I will be there for you. I can't do this for every congregation, but I will be there for you. Yes.
We're talking a lot about the immediate neighborhood.
Yeah.
And just FYI, we have the nicest, the best neighbors. But I would say that this neighborhood around here is about 75% Catholic.
Yeah.
Just FYI.
Are they active Catholic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting, how
And we do have that nursing home that is part of that density. There's quite a few people there, but.
Which one?
Well, couple of them, actually. Well,
Yeah.
actually,
a lot of them.
Library.
yeah,
There's some of that one.
senior
From a-
living facilities.
From a food service source,
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
the big problem is, when you get started, kind of how much do you start with the first time or two? You could have 10 people, you could have 30 people.
Yeah. That's a good question. Obviously you're not going to be preparing a meal for 200 people.
Yeah.
Maybe you think, well, let's have enough for 10 people, 12 people. And if it's rice bowls or casseroles, we can take them home and we'll eat on it.
We've done that.
We can, so you're right. I think you're going to start, if you're going to do that, you're going to start.
Chicken salad.
Yeah.
Brian bought a big bag of rice, so we have plenty of rice that we can share.
Oh, yeah, I bought a 20-pound bag.
We have rice in containers everywhere.
And there are other examples of things that you can do. I'm not saying you must do this. I just liked it. It's proven and it's working in cities across the United States. So I'm like, okay, well, it's working. That's something to consider. Yeah.
Have we thought about with book club and lunch, doing like a community board at the local libraries and advertising that we have the book club and free lunch? on Sundays?
Have we thought about it?
No, not really. We're going to think about it.
Because I think if we had a flyer with the upcoming book.
Yeah.
And said, hey, we have lunch beforehand, we might have some takers.
Yeah.
Our book club has definitely expanded, and so we'd like to expand that more.
Yeah, I've heard that.
That's where you go from.
Yeah, I like to
Something
take what we've got.
Organically.
Yeah, you don't have, absolutely. You've already got something that's going on, yeah.
You brought up a point that I'd like to hear a little bit more about, that the Highlands has scouts and has volleyball and has people using their building, which we are struggling with. Do the people that use their building come to church?
Not really.
Okay.
Now, there are two other congregations that rent their building. So they go to church, they just don't go to Community of Christ, but there's like two different
Other churches like?
other churches that
Okay.
use their building.
I got you.
And, generally the World Church will say long-term renters have to be nonprofits and they have to have their own insurance.
Yeah, we know that very well.
We know that.
Well, yeah, we've had that conversation. When I was the pastor at CBC in Council Bluffs, we wanted to have a daycare and they were like, they hammered me like, I think they're almost trying to talk me out of it, but I found a nonprofit daycare that had great insurance. And so now every day there's a daycare using our facility and it's great. They love it, and there's a need for quality daycare. Now, in that case, there has been a few people who have joined, not parents, but workers, because they get to know us, and there might be a problem in their life, hey, my so-and-so's, my son's going through this or my daughter's going through this, and so there's almost some pastoral type, and they've invited. So I think they have added a few people to their congregation from the daycare, staff members or people who are related to the staff member. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you can do it. And I know this is a great facility. So you can bring just using the building. It's part of our ministry. It doesn't have to be a church.
So if we're approached by somebody who wants to use our building, should we go after that?
Again, the World Church would say, and they would say, are they a nonprofit? Like, for example, Highlands does, people just, because they have a gym, it's a great place to have a kid's birthday party. The church will say, you can't do that.
They used to Meals on Wheels here.
Yeah. They would just say, you've got to be careful because everything's insurance now. They just want to make sure. They will allow, like, if you're a member of the congregation, hey, could we use the church for a birthday party? Of course. And they're also sensitive, and I get it. You start generating revenue. We have to protect our nonprofit status, so they're really big on be really careful about, so when we charge the daycare, it is well below market rate. In fact, some members of the congregation were like, we're giving this building away. I'm like, that's right. Yes, we are. But it was still a good, we charged $3,000 a month. And it was a big daycare and big church. But that building, that was easily, less than half of what other facilities would charge. And it did help our ministry. It helped repair the building. And I know some members of the congregation were really worried about the wear and tear. My perspective was, we're going to wear it out and we'll fix it up again. So I really like the idea of having lots and lots of people. I think CBC became more of a community center where people were worshiping, where they were playing. We had a pickleball, daycare, scouts were using it. There's a neighborhood that started using our building every month for their community meetings.
And they had insurance?
They didn't, but they were grandfathered in.
Okay.
So they were allowed to continue to meet there. Because I asked about that. They were, but daycare was the biggie and the scouts were a biggie for us,
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to my,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
just talk about this, pray about it. And there are lots of, and if you decide, hey, we'd like to do something different, I just want to be supportive of congregations that, want to try to become more meaningful. to people in their community. And I want to be very supportive of that. It's hard for me to drive to Webb Road every week.
Yeah.
And they understand that, and I do get the Webb Road, but any any congregation in the metro, I can be here quickly. Again, if you want to do dinner church, I want to be there and be at least part of your team. I'm not saying I want to take it over, but I want to be there and support you all. Or if you want to do something else, hey, we're going to try this.
Yeah.
I can't, I won't be able to be there every Sunday morning, but if it's an evening, and that's another thing I think a lot of times. The last thing I'll say is I think Sunday morning, maybe after COVID, has become more of a time of people are tired and it's a time of rest and recreation. And so I think sometimes an evening event might even be easier for some people. Not always the case. I'm probably more like my son in that I crave, like I love our sacraments. Like a sacrament Sunday is really meaningful to me. And that's really meaningful to me, but I know if you haven't been going to church for a long time, it's not that meaningful to you. So I have to kind of realize I have to get my worship in a different way. But if I had 200 people showing up for a dinner church, I'd be like, thank you, God. This is amazing. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.